There's an expression once one of the astronaut pilots said, and I thought it was pretty good. We were talking about the risk associated with the space shuttle. And how far do you go to eliminate risk before you commit to flying? And he said the only way we're ever going to have a completely safe space shuttle is to stripe it red and black, or stripe it yellow and black, like a dangerous object, and park it out in front of a museum somewhere. That's the only way it's going to ever be safe. In other words, you don't fly it if you want to be completely safe. Every time that shuttle launched, there was risk associated with it. But we had this marvelous team that was trying to mitigate those risks as best as possible. Through how? Well, through redundancy. In a failure modes and effects analysis document, each component is looked at and addressed. Okay, if this fails, what's going to happen? Now, what procedures, what processes, what redundancy is put in place to protect you from that failure? And at some point, you have to say, this is good enough. I mean, if you want to, you could say, well, hold it, if all 4 of these things fail, you're going to have a tragedy. Yeah, well, that's why we're putting 4 of these things in place. This redundancy, or adding to the strength of some structure more than we think it needs. We're doing that to mitigate those risks. So the risks are always going to be there. In soft environment or operations where life and limb are not at risk, to very dangerous operations. But if people will sit down and look at the risk and address them and ensure the best practices are incorporated in those procedures, and not just look within their own industry or their own companies, but in the industry in which they're operating. They should be going out there and asking, you know, what else has happened out there in this industry, in this mining industry, in this refining industry, in this manufacturing industry? What other near misses and disasters have occurred? Let's make sure we're aware of those so we don't have to relearn something at great expense in life and limb that's something that's already been learned in the past. So let's make sure we capitalize on all the information out there, and let's make it dynamic. Don't just one time sit down and address these risks, but periodically go back and say, okay, what are these in fact the best practices? Have we learned something? Should these practices be modified? There should be no hesitation of modifying a procedure to incorporate a better awareness of some risks. That's completely, in fact, it's a requirement. As I was just talking with the refining New Zealand, and one of the gentlemen there said, hey, we're going to do it in the light of day. You know, if we change procedures, we're going to do it in the light of day. We're going to have everybody on board, make sure it's the right procedures, and we're going to mitigate this risk as best as possible. And I think that's all the way it should be done. You don't shoot from the hip and say, we're going to change the procedures. No, you do it with the right committee, the right people on board, make sure you're doing it right. But it should be a living, breathing thing, and not just something you do once and set on a shelf and think it's going to be the same 20 years later.